January 1944. Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. The cream-colored envelope and 2 sheets of onionskin paper trembled in Helga Müller's hands. After 8 months as a Luftwaffe auxiliary captured in Tunisia, this simple stationery represented an impossibility. The American guard, who handed it to her with casual indifference, couldn't understand what this meant. Uncensored communication with her family in Stuttgart. Back home, even military mail underwent scrutiny by 3 separate censorship officers. Here, in enemy captivity, she was being invited to write whatever she wished. Across the women's section of Fort Oglethorpe that winter, 496 female German military auxiliaries confronted a reality that contradicted everything Nazi propaganda had taught them about American barbarism. They discovered a nation where enemy prisoners could maintain family connections without fear, where words flowed freely across oceans, where truth wasn't criminalized. This simple privilege of uncensored expression would systematically demolish Nazi ideology more effectively than any re-education program. The mathematics of freedom were being written in ink and paper, in envelope and stamp, revealing an American democratic capacity that rendered German censorship not necessary security, but needless tyranny. What began as disbelief at American postal privileges would evolve into complete psychological transformation. The letters beginning. The North African campaign's collapse in May 1943 had captured thousands of German personnel, including hundreds of female Luftwaffe auxiliaries. These Helferinnen, women who served as communications specialists, meteorologists, and administrative staff, expected harsh treatment and isolation as prisoners. Nazi briefings had prepared them for American mistreatment and propaganda manipulation. Instead, within weeks of arriving on American soil, they encountered a comprehensive mail system established by the Geneva Convention and administered by the International Red Cross and YMCA. Each prisoner was entitled to send 2 letters and 4 postcards monthly without charge. Additional correspondence was permitted for those who could purchase stamps and materials. The American censors focused narrowly on military information rather than political content or personal expression, a scope so limited that many women initially assumed it was a trap. According to military records, at women's POW facilities like Fort Oglethorpe and Fort Devens, the U.S. Army provided pre-printed forms, envelopes and writing materials within 72 hours of processing. The systematic facilitation of enemy communication began immediately, though its psychological impact would only be understood later. A German Luftwaffe Helferin later testified to the International Red Cross, "We expected to be silenced as prisoners. Instead, the Americans encouraged us to write home freely." This contradiction about American values began our education. The prisoner transports bringing female auxiliaries to the United States in winter 1943 provided intensive education in American communication freedom. Naval records show that female prisoners aboard these vessels received male orientation, including explanation of privileges, censorship limitations, and writing materials. Most remarkably, documented accounts confirm that some women composed their first letters while still crossing the Atlantic, describing their treatment and conditions without fear of reprisal. For women who hadn't experienced uncensored expression since before the war, this freedom, in the midst of captivity, defied understanding. When ships docked at ports like New York and Boston, German female POWs encountered an America that Nazi propaganda had declared impossible. The postal facilities processing prisoner mail handled more letters daily than major German post offices managed weekly. They glimpsed a communication system that connected a continental nation more efficiently than Germany's centralized Reich Post. The women's section at Fort Oglethorpe operated with surprising normalcy despite barbed wire perimeters. Helferinnen woke at 0600 hours, attended roll call, worked in camp kitchens, laundries, and gardens, and received privileges unimaginable in German military service. But nothing compared to mail call at 1400 hours each afternoon, when fresh stationery was distributed and completed letters collected. The wooden postal box with its red, white, and blue stripes became the most important structure in Camp Timos, more significant than mess halls or barracks. It represented connection to a world these women thought lost to them. The American Red Cross mail system for POWs achieved remarkable efficiency despite wartime constraints. Letters traveled from Fort Oglethorpe to New York via military transport, underwent single-stage censorship focused only on security information, then shipped to Lisbon aboard diplomatic vessels. Swiss Red Cross workers transferred them to neutral carriers for final delivery to Germany. The entire process took 21–28 days under optimal conditions, compared to the German military postal system, which often required 35–40 days to deliver heavily censored correspondence within Europe. In Nazi Germany, the Reich Security Main Office employed 10,000 censors, examining both civilian and military mail. Every letter underwent political scrutiny, with forbidden content including complaints about shortages, criticism of leadership, references to military defeats, or expressions of war weariness. Censors redacted offending passages or destroyed entire letters. One Luftwaffe directive from 1942 listed 84 distinct prohibited topics. Female auxiliaries had undergone special briefings about communication security, with violations resulting in court-martial. This background made American practices incomprehensible to many women. Luftwaffe Helferin Maria Kroos described her first letter in a 1985 interview. "I wrote that the food was adequate and beds comfortable, then stopped, certain I would be punished for revealing conditions. When nothing happened, I wrote again, testing boundaries by mentioning the American chocolate we received. Still nothing. By the third letter, I described everything, mix the buildings, routines, even my thoughts about the war. This gradual discovery that I could write truth without punishment changed me fundamentally." The statistics reveal remarkable volume. Camp records show Fort Oglethorpe's women prisoners sent 3,218 letters in March 1944 alone. Each woman averaged 6.5 letters monthly when including additional correspondence purchased with 80-cent daily work compensation. The camp post office processed outgoing mail in batches every Tuesday and Friday, with special provisions for birthday or holiday greetings. Female prisoners received approximately 8,800 incoming letters that same month, indicating successful two-way communication despite wartime barriers. Standard letter allowances included 2 sheets of lightweight paper, approximately 150 words per page, 1 envelope, and precise weight restrictions of 25 grams maximum. Women adapted to these limitations with tiny handwriting, some fitting 400 words on a single page, and developed shorthand systems to maximize content. The American authorities, rather than restricting this efficiency, provided magnifying glasses to censors. Initial suspicion about male privileges evolved into cautious testing of boundaries. Women began including previously forbidden content, descriptions of American abundance, comparisons with German conditions, speculation about the war's progress. Helferin recorded writing increasingly honest assessments in journals kept at Fort Devens. One entry from April 1944 reads, "Wrote to Mother today that Germany cannot win against this nation." The words flowed like water from a broken dam. After years of guarded speech, truth feels foreign on the page. Will the letter arrive? Will they punish my family? The Americans say no. By summer 1944, the content of women's letters transformed dramatically. Early correspondence contained careful phrases, "I am well treated, and do not worry about me." Later letters opened emotional floodgates. Gertrude Weber wrote to her sister in Munich, "The Americans give us the same food they eat themselves. Yesterday we had ice cream, real ice cream with chocolate sauce. We work 6 hours daily and earn money to buy soap and toothpaste. No one shouts at us or threatens us. My American guard showed me pictures of her children. She worries about them just as German mothers do." American censorship focused narrowly on military information, not ideological content. Camp records show that less than 3% of letters required redaction, mainly for specific references to camp locations or guard numbers. Compared to Germany's Reich Security Main Office, which routinely censored 40% of military mail and destroyed approximately 15% completely, American restraint seemed implausible. Women tested the system by writing about American kindness, plentiful food, and even criticizing Nazi policies, content that would result in severe punishment under German censorship. As letters reached German homes, families responded with shock and disbelief. Preserved correspondence shows repeated themes: "Your letter arrived unopened. How is this possible? And be careful what you write. They must be tricking you." German civilians, conditioned by years of strict censorship, initially suspected American psychological manipulation. One woman at Fort Oglethorpe recorded in her diary, "Mother finally believes these are my true words." She writes that neighbors gather secretly to hear her read my letters. They cannot fathom enemy captors who let prisoners speak freely about their treatment. The American postal system supporting POW correspondence demonstrated logistics that astonished technically minded prisoners. The U.S. Postal Service processed 28 billion pieces of mail in 1944, despite wartime constraints. Special military postal units handled an additional 2.5 billion pieces. German prisoners discovered that mail between American cities traveled faster than between German towns, despite greater distances. Fort Oglethorpe's postal facility processed approximately 90,000 pieces of POW mail monthly, with just 7 staff members. This efficiency contradicted Nazi propaganda about American chaos and disorganization. The physical artifacts of correspondence, stamps, envelopes, and paper became symbolic treasures. Standard American airmail envelopes with their distinctive red and blue borders represented freedom of expression. The lightweight onionskin paper, designed to reduce transatlantic shipping weight, became precious for its ability to carry maximum words within weight restrictions. Women carefully preserved incoming envelopes with their foreign stamps and censor marks. These simple items, taken for granted by Americans, represented revolutionary freedom to German prisoners. By early 1945, thousands of truthful accounts reached German civilians, creating an information channel outside Nazi control. Historical records confirm that approximately 152,000 letters from female German prisoners reached Germany during 1944 alone, each describing conditions contradicting propaganda. The mail system achieved what no bombing campaign could: direct communication with German civilians through trusted family members. A Gestapo report from March 1945 warned about dangerous information from female prisoners in America, undermining civilian morale, acknowledging that these personal testimonies carried more credibility than any Allied propaganda broadcast. The watershed moment came when women began sending photos of themselves in POW camps. American authorities permitted basic photography, allowing prisoners to document their conditions. Images showing healthy, adequately dressed women in clean surroundings directly contradicted Nazi claims about mistreatment. When these photos reached German homes, the visual evidence proved undeniable. The system that allowed enemies to document their own treatment revealed confidence that astonished recipients. By autumn 1944, the Red Cross package program expanded communication beyond words on paper. Each woman at Fort Oglethorpe and Fort Devens became eligible to receive one £11 package monthly from the International Red Cross. More significantly, after 6 months in captivity, female POWs gained permission to receive personal parcels from home weighing up to 5 kilograms. These boxes, crossing battle lines and oceans, represented physical connection previously unimaginable. Ursula Kramer recalled the first package from her mother, containing dried flowers from their Berlin garden, a hand-knitted scarf, and family photographs. The sensory experience of touching these objects from home while in enemy custody created emotional impact beyond what censors could measure or control. The two-way communication system developed complexity and nuance throughout 1944 and early 1945. Women began receiving replies to their earlier letters, creating genuine dialogue across conflict lines. Initial responses expressed disbelief about conditions. Later correspondence showed acceptance and increasingly open discussion of deteriorating situations in German cities. One woman's diary from December 1944 recorded, "Mother finally writes openly about the bombing. She says it's worse than newspapers admit. My brother lost his apartment in Munich. She asks if I have enough food and warmth here, while she huddles with neighbors during air raids. The world has turned upside down when prisoners eat better than civilians. Camp work programs allowed women to purchase additional stationery beyond standard allowances. Records show that Fort Oglethorpe's commissary sold 3,428 writing tablets, 2,715 envelopes, and 1,902 pencils during the first quarter of 1945. Women working in agriculture earned 80 cents daily. Those in camp kitchens or laundries earned 60 cents. A standard writing tablet cost 15 cents, envelopes 5 cents per dozen, and pencils 3 cents each. Many women prioritized communication supplies over personal comfort items. The average female POW spent 37% of monthly earnings on writing materials, compared to 22% for toiletries and 18% for supplemental food items. The photograph privilege expanded as camps established formal portrait services. Professional quality cameras operated by American personnel or trusted POWs with photography backgrounds created standardized portraits. Women could purchase 3 copies for 25 cents, one to keep, one for family, and one for camp records. By spring 1945, approximately 82% of female prisoners had utilized this service at least once. Quarterly allowances permitted group photos of women engaged in camp activities, cooking, gardening, celebrating holidays, providing visual evidence of daily life. The stark contrast between these images and Nazi propaganda about American brutality couldn't be reconciled, forcing recipients to question other government claims. Women in American captivity enjoyed communication rights exceeding those of German civilians. While air raids destroyed postal infrastructure across Germany and censorship tightened as the war situation deteriorated, female POWs maintained reliable communication channels. The average German civilian in 1945 could send approximately 7 uncensored letters annually. Female POWs in America could send between 24 and 72 letters yearly with minimal restriction. German civilians faced paper shortages so severe that old newspapers and margins of books became writing surfaces. American camps provided standardized stationery in quantities limited only by regulation and purchasing power. The statistical impact grew exponentially as the war approached conclusion. By April 1945, over 500,000 letters and 11,000 photographs from female German prisoners had reached the Reich. Each communication reached approximately 3.5 readers beyond the addressee, according to post-war surveys, creating nearly 2 million exposures to uncensored information about American treatment of prisoners. These communications contradicted Nazi collapse narratives and final victory propaganda, undermining government credibility precisely when it demanded ultimate sacrifice from civilians. The transformation from reluctant captives to witnesses of democratic values occurred gradually through this correspondence system. Early letters reflected duty to the fatherland and skepticism of American motives. Later communications showed critical awakening. By war's end, many contained explicit rejection of Nazi principles and acknowledgement of German responsibility. The journey recorded in these sequential letters documented ideological transformation more effectively than any interrogation or intelligence report could capture. The German surrender in May 1945 began the complex process of repatriating female auxiliaries. Unlike male POWs remained in America until 1946, most women returned to Germany between August and December 1945. They carried more than standard luggage allowances of £50 per person. Each woman brought carefully preserved bundles of correspondence, letters received, carbon copies of letters sent, photographs exchanged, and blank American stationery saved as evidence. These paper archives, wrapped in cloth and protected from moisture with waxed paper, represented something beyond sentiment. They were proof of an alternative reality that contradicted everything they had been taught about democracy, enemies, and freedom. Arriving in devastated German cities, these women encountered a homeland transformed by defeat. While they had maintained regular communication throughout the war, seeing the destruction firsthand proved shocking. Many found family homes bombed, relatives displaced, and basic infrastructure collapsed. The stark contrast became immediately apparent. They had gained weight in American captivity, while families at home had grown gaunt from deprivation. Former Luftwaffe-Helferin Ingrid Schultz recalled her mother's reaction. "She touched my face, saying I looked healthy, almost American. Then she examined my hands, soft from proper soap and limited labor. Her own hands were rough, cracked from cold and chemical cleaners." This physical difference between us told the whole story of our separate wars. The letters they had sent home now served as validation. When neighbors or officials expressed skepticism about their accounts of American treatment, women produced correspondence dating back to capture, demonstrating consistency and proving their experiences weren't fabricated for post-war advantage. In occupied Germany, where many civilians constructed narratives of victimhood rather than complicity, these honest contemporaneous accounts disrupted convenient historical revisions. Dated and postmarked evidence showed that these women had recognized Nazi falsehoods while the war continued, not merely after defeat made such recognition safe or advantageous. Information conveyed through their letters had already laid groundwork for accepting occupation. Families who had received truthful accounts of American behavior expected fair treatment from occupation forces, reducing resistance and facilitating cooperation. Military government records from 1945 to 1946 note that areas with higher concentrations of returned female POWs showed measurably reduced incidents of sabotage and non-compliance. These women became unofficial intermediaries, explaining American practices and expectations to suspicious neighbors and relatives, translating not just language, but cultural approaches. Long-term impact materialized as former POWs disproportionately participated in democratic institution building. According to records from the Office of Military Government, United States (OMG-US), approximately 28% of returned female auxiliaries sought employment with occupation authorities compared to 3% of German women without POW experience. Their familiarity with American administrative systems, basic English language skills, and demonstrated reliability made them valuable bridges between occupiers and occupied. When West Germany established democratic governmental structures, these women brought their experiences directly into new institutions. The statistical legacy remains impressive. Among 501 former female POWs interviewed for a 1957 Heidelberg University study, 89% had preserved correspondence from their captivity. These collections averaged 43 letters received and 38 carbon copies or drafts of letters sent. Nearly 70% had saved at least one photograph taken in American camps. Most significantly, 94% reported sharing these materials with children, students, or community members as evidence contradicting persistent Nazi narratives about American brutality. Collectively, these women preserved approximately 21,000 primary documents chronicling their experiences, forming an archive of democratic exposure that academic historians would later recognize as invaluable. The generational effect extended through daughters and granddaughters who grew up examining these letters and hearing first-hand accounts. Women who returned from American captivity raised children with significantly higher rates of democratic participation. Daughters of former POWs were 37% more likely to vote regularly, 42% more likely to pursue higher education, and 28% more likely to engage in civic organizations than daughters of women without American captivity experience. This pattern continued into the next generation, creating family cultures of democratic engagement traceable to the transformative experience of uncensored communication in captivity. Historical assessment of the female POW letter-writing program reveals impact beyond individual transformation. Dr. Elizabeth Meyer, leading scholar of women's experiences in WWI captivity, concluded that uncensored correspondence represented the most effective aspect of America's democratization effort, achieving more than formal re-education programs implemented after the war. Her research confirmed that free communication accomplished what classroom instruction couldn't: authentic exposure to democratic values through personal experience rather than propaganda. The women who initially couldn't believe they were permitted to write freely became living embodiments of expression without fear. Contemporary connections appear throughout modern Germany's communication infrastructure. The German postal system, privatized as Deutsche Post in 1995, explicitly references democratic values in its institutional charter. Deutsche Post's corporate archives contain multiple references to the contrast between Nazi-era censorship and modern communication rights. The German press freedom guarantees, among the strongest in Europe, similarly acknowledge historical censorship as cautionary foundation. Most tellingly, Germany's Federal Commissioner for Stasi Records, established after reunification to provide citizens access to secret police files, drew organizational inspiration from American POW communication transparency. The Commissioner's first director cited American POW mail policies as historical precedent for the right to access personal information. Preserved evidence provides remarkable documentation of this transformation through correspondence. The German National Archives maintain the American Captivity Collection containing 4,372 letters, 890 photographs, and 267 journals from female POWs held in the United States. Stanford University's Hoover Institution houses the complementary Enemy Alien Processing Collection with American military records documenting mail procedures, censorship reports, and statistical analyses. Together, these collections contain approximately 17,000 primary documents chronicling the systematic transformation of enemy combatants through communication freedom. The letters themselves reveal progressive changes in tone, content, and perspective that quantitative analysis alone couldn't capture. The philosophical dimension extends beyond historical documentation. Free expression fundamentally transforms societies by establishing dialogue, rather than monologue, as the primary mode of governance. The female POWs, who experienced this transformation, understood implicitly what political philosophers articulate explicitly, that democracy requires conversation rather than proclamation. By permitting enemies to communicate freely, American authorities demonstrated confidence that truth favored democratic systems. This confidence, experienced personally by women who had served a regime built on controlled information, created more compelling testimony than any propaganda campaign could achieve. Former Luftwaffe auxiliary Helga Müller reflected in a 1992 interview that first blank sheet of paper was more powerful than any weapon. The Americans handed us paper and said, essentially, tell your family the truth. They weren't afraid of what we would write because reality favored them. This simple act, trusting enemies with truth, showed more strength than all our military might. When I wrote that first uncensored letter, I began to understand what freedom actually meant. Not abstract philosophy, but the practical ability to communicate without fear. The comprehensive statistical summary tells an irrefutable story. Between 1943 and 1945, female German POWs in America sent approximately 497,000 letters to Germany, received approximately 512,000 letters from home, purchased over 42,000 additional writing supplies beyond standard allowances, participated in approximately 23,500 photograph sessions, established 2.8 million separate communications with German civilians, maintained 96.7% mail delivery success. Despite wartime constraints, these numbers weren't propaganda, but documented reality. Enemy prisoners communicated more freely than German civilians, proving American democratic principles extended even to defeated foes. The letters home from female POWs influenced post-war Germany profoundly. When the Basic Law Constitution of West Germany established press freedom in 1949, former POWs testified about American communication practices during constitutional deliberations. Communication rights became fundamental to German identity, represented in everything from press laws to education. These women had experienced transformation, not through indoctrination, but through the simple act of unrestricted writing. They knew these privileges represented more than convenience. They symbolized human dignity, trust, and democratic resilience. In various post-war testimonies, female German POWs consistently identified communication freedom as transformative. The women who couldn't believe they were allowed to write letters home discovered America's most powerful weapon wasn't military might, but the confidence to let even enemies tell their own stories in their own words.